Hey Zoo, happy Friday. Hope you guys are doing good. Hope you're staying warm out of the rain. Hope you're healthy. I know this is a little different. Normally we don't do videos on Friday, but today's a pretty special day in the church. Today is called Good Friday, and normally what we'd be doing is you would potentially be going to a Good Friday service with your family. But since that can't happen, we just decided we're going to do a short little Devo for you guys to kind of go over Good Friday, why it's important to remember it. And I think right off the bat, the weird thing with Good Friday is that you think about it and you go, why is a day that is remembering probably one of the most graphic and sad stories of the Bible, why is it called good? Because a lot of times when I hear the Good Friday story, I read it and I think about it, and nothing about that story makes me feel good or happy inside, because it's a pretty sad, terrible story. And the reason that that story is called good is because what it's remembering is the goodness of the God that we follow and the goodness of our Creator, and it's the gift that we're given through the cross that the reason this story is called good. And so the reason that we want to do this today is just to take some time out of your Friday, whatever it is that you are doing, and just remember that the gift that we're given and why we still remember this day many, many, many years later. And so pause this, get your Bible, or just follow along with me. We're going to read real quick Matthew chapter 27, starting in verse 27. And it goes like this. It says, "Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the governor's headquarters, and they gathered the whole battalion before him, and they stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. And twisting together a crown of thorns, they put it on his head, and they put a reed in his right hand. And kneeling before him, they mocked him, saying, 'Hail, King of the Jews!' And they spit on him and took the reed and struck him on the head. And when they had mocked him, they stripped him of the robe and put on his own clothes on him, and they led him away to crucify him." And then you skip down to verse 45, still in Matthew chapter 27, and it says, "Now from the 6th hour there was darkness all over the land until the 9th hour. And about the 9th hour Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, 'Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani?' That is, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And some of the bystanders heard it, and they said, "This man is calling Elijah." And one of them at once ran and took a sponge, filled it with sour wine, and put it on a reed, and gave it to him to drink. But the others said, "Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come and save him." And Jesus cried out again with a loud voice, and yielded up his spirit. And behold, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth shook, and the rocks were split, and the tombs were also opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming out of the tombs after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many. When the centurion and those who were with him, keeping watch over Jesus, saw the earthquake and what took place, they were filled with awe and said, "Truly, this was the Son of God." And so we read this story and we see what Jesus goes through. And I think for a lot of us, myself included, a lot of times when I hear the story, I recognize, like any story about hearing somebody get whipped and spit on and mocked and crucified and suffer a terrible death, the natural human reaction is to go, "Dang, that sounds terrible. I feel really bad for that person. I'm thankful that it wasn't me," and then we move on. And I think even knowing that it's Jesus who went through that, it's still hard for us to fully understand the weight and the intensity of this story. And it's easy to hear the story and go, "Wow, that sounds terrible," and then turn off the video or close our Bible and to go back to whatever it is we were doing. Because it's hard to really connect with the story that happened a long, long time ago and happened to someone, although it's Jesus, who we haven't met, we don't know. And it's not until that I pause and I go, let me place myself in this story. Let me place myself in that spot of Jesus and think about getting whipped, and think about getting mocked, and think about getting spit on with a crown of thorns placed on my head. Think about getting the nails pounded through my hands. Let me place myself in that story. And that's when it becomes real to me, and I go, I could not even imagine having to go through that. There's no way that I would ever voluntarily go through that. And it's when I place myself in the story that all of a sudden the intensity and the weight of what Jesus went through hits me, and I realize that in a very real way, that should have been me. That should have been all of us. You see, the only reason that Jesus had to go through that and he willingly suffered that was because he loves us and he was a sacrifice for us. It says in Romans chapter 6, verse 23, that the punishment of sin is death. And for all of us, every single one of us, myself included, we're all sinners. And the punishment that we faced is death. And the reality of the story is every time Jesus was spit on, every time he was mocked, every time that he suffered and went through pain and overall died, it's because of our sin. It's our sin that nailed Jesus to the cross. It's our sin that did that. And it's when I realized that I realized why we still remember this day, why we still think about it, why we're called to still read the story and remember that something pretty crazy happened a long time ago, and it happened for us. And it still begs the question of, well, why did Jesus have to die? Why couldn't there have been a different solution? Why was it necessary for him to suffer that way? The fact of the matter is because we follow a perfect God. God is a perfect creator. And because of our sin, we're separated from our perfect creator. If you think about it, if something's perfect, think about a perfect, purified, nice, fresh glass of water. Right? If you have that glass of water and it has been purified and it's clean and it's cold and it's ready to drink, what happens if you take just a small little bit of, let's say, mud and you put it in that glass of water? Or maybe a small little bit of oil or poison or whatever it is. If it doesn't matter how small, if you drop it in that perfect purified glass of water, now that glass of water isn't perfect. It isn't purified anymore. It's immediately what happens is it gets mixed up throughout that entire glass of water. And the problem is, it doesn't matter how little that imperfection is. Now something that was perfect before is no longer perfect. And so for us in our imperfection, we can't be with our perfect creator because our imperfection would mess that up. And so because of sin, we're separated. And so there needed to be a solution. And there needed to be something that made it so that sin no longer separated us from God. And the reason Jesus' death was necessary on the cross was because, like we said, the punishment of sin is death. So there had to be death. And the reason that Jesus was the perfect sacrifice was because he was perfect. And because of his perfection, it made up for the sins of everyone. And so the reason we remember Good Friday is because in this story we see that through the death on the cross, our title changes. It goes from sinner to saved. And in this story we see that our price is paid by Jesus out of love, out of our Creator going, I love each and every single person so much that I am going to give my son for their sin. And it's in this Good Friday story that we recognize it's not necessarily the story that is good because it's a sad, heavy story. But it's the goodness of our God who says, I'm going to send a sacrifice for us that's good. And the gift that we receive that's good. And that our title goes from sinner to saved. And the story doesn't end there. I invite you to join in Sunday to hear the rest of the story and how not only is our price paid for, but our eternity's changed as well. And I hope that you take some time after this to just think about that, realize the amazing God that you follow, and realize that today's not just any other Friday. It's a Friday that changed our lives and changes our eternity and changes who we are. And so take some time to think about that. Hopefully you have a great Friday. Miss you guys. See you Sunday.